the last workshop of the day, and well, let's start recording. So, welcome everyone to the last workshop of the day with Brian Oblinger, uh, someone who doesn't really need an introduction in the industry, but I'll try to do justice to his introduction. He's been in the industry for about 25 years. He's the co-host of sorry, he's the co-host of the podcast In Before the Law. You must have heard of it. If you haven't, you must go listen to it. It's a treasure trove for community builders. He is the founder and lead instructor of Community Strategy Academy, and today he will be leading us in the workshop to advance strategies on communities at scale. Uh, Over to you, Ryan.
Thank you. Thank you. And let's see, who do we have? We have Jamie, we have Kevin, Natalia, and Susan. I guess we'll see if anybody else joins. But hey, everybody, how are we doing? Hey, Tim. Um, Very good. All right. So there's a few of us here. We'll see how many other folks join us. I have a pretty significant amount of content and whatnot prepared for today. I think we can sort of decide, given group size and different things, like how we want to proceed. I think this was scheduled for like an hour and a half or something. We'll do our best to sort of make that useful to you, or shorten it or whatever. We'll make sure we do some breaks along the way. I guess actually before I share my screen and get started here, one of the things I wanted to do, given the topic of this talk, or this workshop, I should say, is I wanted to actually kind of understand, for those of you that are here, how do you think about the word scale, right? What kind of communities have you built? Just so I can get a sense of kind of understanding before we jump in here, sort of where you're coming from, what you're hoping to learn. And, that way I can sort of tailor what we're talking about a little bit. So you don't have to unmute and chat, but I guess maybe what I'll do is I'll just sort of kind of go through the list here as I can see it on my screen, and maybe give me a quick intro of you, and then what kind of community you manage, and kind of how you would define scale, or how you think about it, if that works for folks. So maybe we'll start with Tim. Tim, you're unlucky, man. You're the first one on my screen here.
Sure.
So we'll start with Tim.
Yeah. So, hey, everyone. So I work on a new community called Open Source Science. It's non-commercial. It's for advancing science through better open source infrastructure. It's been around for a year. It's still super small. And when we think about scaling next year, it is going to be relative to where we are today. So it's not going to be like millions. It's going to be going from maybe like 100 collaborators to maybe 500, and the wider network of people that are following us maybe from a few hundred to a few thousand, right? So like 10x is like the mission for next year. So, but relative to where we are, that's going to be a lot of scaling.
Gotcha. Okay. Good to see you, Tim. Thank you. Laura, you're sort of next on my screen. Would love to hear from you.
Hi, y'all. Well, I am looking for work. So I'm not managing any community right now. But previously, I was running a small, intimate grantee community for a funder that was investing in nonprofit news organizations that were trying to build out business sustainability. So that's pretty common across industries. It's like building out an executive team, running an amazing hiring process, those kind of big, good, best practices.
Gotcha. Okay. Welcome. Susan, I see you. How about you?
Hey, I met you years ago at a chorus conference. You probably spoke for just a couple of minutes, so it's great to see you doing your new business now. But this is my first community manager job, but I come from, and it's a new community with more of a startup organization. But I come from a very strong background in knowledge-centered service and focusing on knowledge bases, and then trying to release those into the community. And for my community right now, what I'm seeing is a lot of the users are engaging in the knowledge, and that's one of the main things that they're doing. So that's good for me for my knowledge hat, but not so much for my community hat.
Gotcha. Okay, great. And Jamie, Natalia, the other Tim, I don't see you, so maybe you don't want to chat. That's okay. But if you'd like, you're certainly welcome to unmute and give us your story real quick as well.
Hi, Natalia here. I manage, we built a community in the renewable energy sector. Right now we have many users, but we are struggling with the community side of the community. So that's why I'm learning a lot. It's scaling up for us will be most probably tenfold. Right now I have 1,000 people in the community, but no engagement so much.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, I don't see anybody else queuing up. So good enough. So here's what we'll do. Let me give you kind of an overview of, what we sort of have prepared here, how it's oriented, how to think about it. I'll go ahead and share my screen so you can see that. And let me put that into presentation mode, which I did not do the other day and learned the hard way. So hopefully that's coming through for you. And what I will do is occasionally, they're sort of on different tabs here. So occasionally, actually, let's see if I can do this without breaking everything. Try to put this where I can see the chat. There we go. So hopefully you still see my screen and you still hear me and everything's working. That way I can see the chat. But throughout this, I'll provide some times for us to, kind of unmute and have some conversation and stuff like that. So what the content part of this is today and sort of the basis of this is we're going to talk about communities at scale. Now, everybody has a very different, kind of definition of that. So I'll provide one of my own. I think what you'll find is that when I talk about scale, oftentimes, and a lot of the content here is about like these massive communities, right? Now, you might be saying, well, wait a minute, I don't have this massive community. I'm not planning on having this massive community. And I think that's okay, actually, right? I think there's a lot that we can learn from these big communities and what they do and help you, regardless of whatever size or shape or whatever that you're building, sort of form, what you do, right? So I'm going to talk a lot about, especially up front, like defining those big communities and that sort of thing. But once we get a little bit further down the line into, what they do and their challenges and their strategies and all that kind of stuff, the goal is that, you can kind of take that and, you can ignore some of it, you can run with some of it, whatever's going to be useful to you. And spoiler alert, as you've already probably figured out here, this is like a course that I've published. So at the very end, I'm going to give you a code and you can go get this for free, for the like recorded version of it there. So either way, you'll have access to this forever. Okay. But this one's going to be a little bit more interactive and, that sort of thing. So as I mentioned, not all communities are created equal. A lot of the stuff that people do, quote unquote, at scale doesn't work in small communities and vice versa, but there are a lot of things that we can sort of translate. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. So first I'm going to define it. Then I'm going to sort of delve into like, when we talk about an at scale community, what does that mean? And like, what are some of the core differences versus maybe something that's, smaller and that sort of thing to help us provide some context. I'm going to tell you about the challenges of scale, and you'll see me like wincing and maybe tearing up as I like have flashbacks to working at scale in some communities. But again, things to learn there. We'll talk about like strategic approaches. I think this is probably going to be where we'll focus a good amount of our time because regardless of your community size, like I said, we can learn from what they do strategically. And then we'll talk a little bit about, kind of at the end, like career, like, do you want to be in a gigantic community or, what are the different career paths you can do or like how do teams sort of change? Because these types of communities are just sort of different and unique and, it's not for everybody exactly. So with all that said, let me tell you a little bit about when I talk about community at scale, talking about a specific type of community, but again, we'll dive into a bunch of things. Generally speaking, at scale, we're talking about like depth, breadth, reach, impact, big, large, a lot going on, high volume, and usually all of the combination of those things. That you have some like unique governance challenges, right? You have to sort of think about community in a different way, because you can't do things in a community that size or that scale that you would in a smaller community, right? That may seem obvious, but we'll dive into like what some of those things are. I think the last point on here is even more important, which is, when you get to a scale, whatever it is, typically like the responsibility of the community inside of an organization is greater, right? Because you're bigger, you're whatever, and everybody's looking to you of like, okay, what's the value that this thing is building, right? Like how are we going to leverage this? And we'll talk a little bit about why that is. But just know that, I guess, to sum all of this up, it only gets harder. Right? It only gets, there's more to do. There's more volume of it. And overall, you're going to have a lot more pressure and things like that as you scale your community. So we'll talk a little bit about that. All right, just checking the chat. Don't see anything. All right, great. So let's like kind of visualize this, right? And I'll kind of do like the business school 101 thing here, where we have sort of large to small audience and then low to high activity. And I want to kind of chart this to sort of help, maybe see like where you're at on this, but also like as we think about these big, massive communities, where they are and what they're doing. First and foremost, there's sort of this whole brand of, communities. It's like, Slack and Discord communities. Generally speaking, in the large scope of things, they're kind of down here in the corner, right? They're relatively low kind of audience size typically. And they're, kind of low activity. Now you may be thinking, well, wait a minute, I have a community like this and it's actually really active and, there's a lot of people in it and whatever. In a minute, when I get to talking about like some of these really large communities, you'll see why that's down in the corner. It's not a slight on them. It's just a in context, sort of thing. Then there's sort of this other class of communities, which are like your Facebook groups, your LinkedIn groups. On Facebook, in particular, you tend to find these groups that have a massive amount of people in them, or at least they're followed, or, whatever, they've joined it. But the activity is still pretty low, right? And so we see this a lot where they amass a very large amount of people, but they're just still not, fully active. And I think some of that has to do with tooling. Some of that has to do with that audience in particular and other things, but they kind of sit somewhere, generally speaking. There's always outliers, right? But generally speaking, they sit somewhere in there. Then I think this is where kind of the vast majority of like public forum type communities exist today. They have a pretty decent sized audience, not the biggest, not the smallest. And they have a pretty good amount of activity. Again, not the most, not the least. But I'd say like most communities fit into a bubble, kind of like that. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? For a lot of people, like that is at scale. But then there's sort of this like other thing, which looks like this, right? And these are the communities that, you probably know some of them, and I'll show you some examples in a minute. But these are the ones where they have hundreds of thousands of users, right? They have just massive quantities of activity. Just like kind of staggering almost, like how big they are. And there's only so many of them in the world, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And so a lot of the things we're going to talk about in the course today are like learnings from that orange bubble, right? It doesn't mean that those things only work there, but that's sort of who we're focusing on, who we're going to be learning from, and the types of things they face. And again, you can kind of take some of those things or leave them, or decide if they're relevant to you. Or if you're, sort of looking to join a community like that, at least this will be a good primer to sort of understand what you're going to face. So there's different sort of angles to look at this, and you do you on that. Make sense so far? Any questions? Nope. Okay. Good. All right. So what are some examples of those big orange bubble communities, right? Well, some of these probably look pretty familiar, like your Reddits of the world, your Stack Overflows of the world. Some of these you all probably know and love. Maybe like Gaia you've never heard of before, or, maybe you've heard of DeviantArt, or maybe you haven't. there's actually a Wikipedia page that you can go find where there's a list, and who knows how complete it is, right? But there's a list there of communities that are purportedly 1 million members or more, of which I believe there's only like 80 or 85 of those on the list. And so, there's a very small subset of these. They are sort of the 1% of communities. And, some of these you look at and say, well, they're more social, that kind of thing. We could argue about that. But just in terms of the number of people and the amount of interactions that are happening, right, these are what we mean when we say like, oh, that is a super massive, like, less than 1% scale type of a community. So these are the kinds of folks that I'm sort of diving into and we're going to kind of learn from today. But you can go check out that list and see who else is on there. And you might be surprised, like there's some that are really kind of like obscure and like narrowly focused on like one strange like little thing. And it's interesting how people can build scale even around a very narrow subset of topics. And yes, thank you, Laura, for putting that in the chat. That is the list. So pretty cool to like look at. As I said before, like this can't be underscored enough. Like there's a high volume of everything in these communities. And I think people think they know what volume is until you work in a community like that and you're doing moderation or administration or something. It's just, it's a next level situation that kind of forces you to think differently about what a community is and how do you even begin to manage this, because there's no way as like a staff that you can scale to that level, right? And I think that's true actually of most communities. I mean, there's always going to be some, very lopsided, very lopsided ratio of members to users. And so you have to think about, okay, how do I approach that problem? How do I build things for that world? The other thing is, as you sort of prepare for scale, whatever that means to you, the bigger a community gets, the more people that are in it, the more things that are going on, and sort of the broader applicability to the humans of the earth, right? If you think about some of those things, we like Reddit, for example, it just becomes this situation where all communities are always on, right? Like we're not turning them off in non-business hours or something, but these are like next level on, right? And what I mean by that is there's just always something happening, and just when you think you've seen it all, something else happens. And as I'll talk about a little bit later, like managing a community at a large scale, it kind of becomes almost more like survival than it does anything else. And it's not because you want to do that, it's because you have to do that to sort of manage and deal with a community at that scale. Now, maybe your communities, aren't like that or won't be like that or that sort of thing, and that's okay. But as I said before, I think, some of their key learnings will still be relevant to us. Before I go into sort of the core differences of like what makes, what makes scale, what does that mean? What are the things you have to think about? Any other questions? Any other comments? Let me just pop back over to the chat here. Nope. Okay. All right. So let's talk about core differences. What makes these different? What do you need to be thinking about? First and foremost, and I alluded to this a few minutes ago, greater expectations, right? You typically have, as you scale your community, whether you're 100 people or 5,000 people or 1 million people or 100 million people in your community, the bigger it gets, the more important it becomes in your organization, and you're just going to have a broader set of stakeholders. Now, if you followed me anywhere on the internet, prior to this, you've heard all of this, what I'm about to say before, but it's worth repeating that this is why, as community builders, we have to become chameleons. We have to get really, really good at talking to different sets of people inside of an organization, outside of our organization. We have to get good at that. And we have to get comfortable with that, because the bigger and the better and the greater your community becomes, the more people are going to take interest in it. And then you're going to have to sort of manage, right, all of that cross collaboration and work with those stakeholders. And so, just kind of understand that if you think you're going to build a community and scale it up to some degree and those sorts of things, and you're going to do so in a silo by yourself without ever talking to anybody, I think you're probably going to be in for a pretty large shock there. So kind of keep that in mind as we go. You're going to have more ambitious targets, right? Like goals only get bigger. Like I don't think I've ever been in a meeting where people were like, let's back our goals down. Let's cut those in half. Maybe you've been in a meeting like that, but as these expectations grow, so do the targets and so do the things that people expect from the outputs of your community. And so, you're going to have to contend with that a little bit. And we'll talk about how you do that when we get to some of the strategic stuff here in a little bit. Okay. No patience for failure, right? I think when you're, in a company and you're running a community and it's smaller and it's not, having this outsized impact on your business or whatever the case is, you can, kind of skate by. You can hide a little bit. You can do those things. The more that you scale, the more in tune people will be with the outputs and the outcomes. And there's just not a lot of patience. Now, am I saying that, of course, like we all fail. I've failed more times, I've probably failed enough for all of us on this call. Okay. So it's okay. That's going to happen. But the point is that other people, it's not even like, what have you done for me lately? It's just like, what have you done in the last 6 seconds? And how can you, what are you going to do for me next? Right. So that's a really big piece there that you have to just start to contend with. Last but not least, again, as I said before, more. People are going to want more. There's going to be more ideas. There's going to be more, hey, can we use the community for this, that, and the other thing? Some of those ideas are going to be, let's say, not so good, right? And you'll have to learn how to like deflect those and deal with those bad ideas and, turn people away. You end up having like the opposite problem of most community professionals, which is like they're hunting, right? They're going out, they're trying to talk to people. We're trying to like get use cases going in our communities. When you get to scale and it's successful, that script completely flips. And then you have all of these people coming to you all the time saying, can we do this? Can we do that? And now you're sort of in a position you're not used to being in terms of having to answer all of those questions and deflect some of the bad ideas and those things. So those are the great expectations. And Akash says, I say failure is better than not trying. That is true. But it also depends on like people's perception of you and, are you succeeding or failing? And you have to kind of manage that as well. Okay. All right. Broader set of needs. So bigger audience, more personas. Typically, as you build a bigger community and you scale, the bigger your audience becomes. That means the less kind of narrowly focused they are typically, not always, but typically. And so you as a community builder have to figure out, how do I cater to a bunch of different kinds of people? Maybe some that I didn't want to, that I didn't set out to build this community for, but the business now has different needs, or we're going into a different market or different locales, or we're, targeting different personas or whatever the case might be. You're just going to have, sort of more personas to think about and to deal with overall, as you scale. As I said before, more use cases from the business, right? Some good, some bad, some in between. A lot of communities begin life in this like, hey, we're a support community. We're a this, that, or the other use case. But as you scale, typically you're adding use cases, right? To the point where it's like, people are like, oh, what kind of community do you have? And it's like, yes, all of them. We do ideas. We do support. We do customer success, like onboarding and enablement. We do product feedback. We do advocacy, right? Like whatever all those different types of use cases are, you find yourself in a world someday where you're doing many of them or all of them, which is, a very big differentiator from what a lot of maybe your peers do, kind of like less scale or where they're focused, more on just one use case. Typically you have a bigger team. Now, some of you might see this and say, when does that happen, Brian? Like, let me know when I get the bigger team. But I'm just saying that like, as you, scale community and it becomes successful and you have these outcomes, typically you have more people, working on it. Now, those may be actual people on a community team, but it also might just be these are people around the business that I'm now collaborating with, right? And so you're going to have to do more collaboration, as I said before, and mo people, mo problems, right? So there's that. And then just like more complication of all of those things combined, right? And how do you sort of deal with that complexity? How do you prioritize? How do you let some things go that maybe you used to think were important but aren't now? Your whole mindset, sort of shifts. And we'll talk about this in a little bit, of like, how do you deal with that? And how do you start to build like a mental model for decision-making, prioritization, and like letting go of certain things? Not because you want to, but again, because you have to. You just won't have a choice, right? As you sort of scale up your efforts. Okay. All right. Let's go to different levels of focus. So what I mean by this is typically like whatever you did in the beginning isn't going to get you to where you're going at, like once you reach a certain scale. There will be some inflection point. I don't know where it is, or, I wish I could tell you that, on the 7th month of the 7th year, like you'll get, I don't know what it is. But at some point you'll sort of go past this point of no return, and you'll realize a lot of the stuff that we did to get here actually aren't going to like work here, but they're also not going to take us to whatever the next level is. And so you have to really think differently about, at that maturity level and scale, like, okay, this is just different now. This is a different community, different people, different focus. And we're going to have to kind of, rebuild our mental model of this community in our heads so we can manage it. It also kind of gets to the point where it's less about personal attention and unscalable tactics. Now, this is hurtful, right? Like a lot of people they get into community because this is what they want to do. I want to care about people. I want to build belonging. I want to give that, surprise and delight, the personal touch. I'm going to do super unscalable things to get there. And like, they really like that. And that's okay, right? Like that's a choice that you make. But as you get to scale and maturity, you start to realize, even if you really want to, you just can't do that as much, right? Because it's just too big. It's too complex. There's so much going on. And so that's one of the big shifts kind of in your focus that happens, whether you like it or not. And again, you can decide if that's for you or not, and like choose your career path based on something like that. But just know that that's coming and going to happen as you get larger and larger. And like the bigger the community is, the more true that is. And you find yourself like, I've worked in gigantic communities with hundreds of thousands, maybe even like 1 million or more members. And you sort of get to the point where you realize, like, I don't know that I really know anybody anymore, which is kind of sad, right? When you're trying to like run a community. I probably knew like, our MVPs and like those, advocates and whatnot. But beyond that, you kind of realize like, I'm just swimming in an ocean of like 2 million people here. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to like personalize stuff at that level. So that becomes a real challenge. As I mentioned before, when you get here, like it feels like survival. You're going to get out of this. You try to be proactive as much as possible, but you're going to realize that you're becoming a lot more reactive, especially if you start to think about like those super scale communities, some of those examples I showed you before, right? Like people at Reddit, people at Stack Overflow, people on communities like that. They're just reacting, to what's going on because it's so fast. There's so much happening. There's so much focus on it from the media and from investors. And like, at that level, it's definitely survival. But I think you'll feel this even at a much lower scale as you move along, that it's maybe less about like the building and the growing and again, the personal stuff than it is just like, I'm just trying not to like keel over every day while I manage this thing. Right. And then you might find yourself in a position where, and these numbers make less sense than just the idea of scale. Maybe you were building for 10 people initially, and now you're building for 1,000. That's a whole different level of like building programs and focus. Or if you're like, hey, I used to build for 10,000 people, now I'm building for 100,000, or I'm building for millions, or whatever it is. It's just a different like type of program that you're going to have to build, right? Like some programs at a lower scale, you build it and you launch it, and like 100 people see it in the first 48 hours or something. You may find yourself in a world someday where like you build and launch a program and, I don't know, 40,000 people see it in the first, week that it's available. So it's just like, you can imagine, like, it's just a different, kind of like way of operating there. I'm just rolling through this. I'll keep my eye on the chat. If you have any questions or anything you want to dive into, let me know there. Technical stack is definitely going to change, right? Like a lot of us started out our communities in these Slacks and Discords and free platforms and, like open source, like BBSs and, whatever the case might be. Certainly as you scale, the tech stack is going to just get bigger and badder and like more complicated and more to do. So that's just the way that it's going to be. You're going to have a lot more stuff. You're going to have a lot more tools, a lot more systems. You won't have a choice. It'll just become something you have to do. Now you can manage it, right? You can say like, are we doing the right things? Do we have the right platform? Should we migrate things? Should we, plug something else in? You should always be thinking that way of like optimization, not just more. But nonetheless, there will be more and you can try to optimize them there. I see Akash says, can we scale the same programs we were using for smaller audiences, or do we always have to come up with new programs? That's a really good question. I kind of think that realistically speaking, when we talk about programs in communities, there's still only like 10 or 15 core programs at any given community, right? Promotion plan, gamification, content, groups, those kinds of things. I could probably name all the other ones too. I don't know that you have to like pick different ones or change them wholesale. I think it's just about like how they're deployed and how you measure them probably is going to be the difference, and like what scale they're at. So maybe your groups program goes from being like, hey, we're doing, 6 a year, like groups in person or hybrid or virtual or whatever, to like, oh, now we're at Salesforce or Tableau or, something like that. And we're running these globally across the world every single day with hundreds of people, attending them. So I don't think the programs themselves change. I think it's just more about like how we conceptualize it and run it as they scale and like just try to keep up with, what the needs are of our members. So really good question, but I don't think there's a whole bunch of like different programs depending on scale. We're all kind of doing the same stuff, but in different ways, if that makes sense. Tech stack, complicated, data integrations, automations. We'll talk about the automations one. Like, I think we're kind of fortunate that we live in a world now where there's all these platforms, right? Your common rooms, your talk bases, your Orbit, Threado, like I don't want to leave anybody out here, right? These sort of like automation platforms that you can hook into your communities to help automate these things. We just didn't have that 2 or 3 years ago. And then obviously much longer ago. I'm going to sound like an old man here, but managing this stuff back in the 90s or the early 2000s was very much like the community version of, I used to walk uphill in the snow each day, kind of a thing in community, right? Like we just didn't have that stuff. So I think we're in a much better position. You're all in a much better position. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean, you just plug this stuff in and everything's automated and you get to go on vacation and like let it run, at least not yet. Shout out, AI and GPTs, but there's going to just be more of that stuff as you scale. And I think you should explore how you can leverage it, right? To make your life easier, because at scale, you need to do that. If you're doing everything manually, you're going to have a hard time. Most communities at scale or approaching scale sort of have a whole roadmap or, that sort of thing dedicated to just the tech stack, which I think is a big change for a lot of people. Because early on in your community or like lower scale, you're like, yeah, I mean, we think about it, but once you buy your community platform and you implement it, it's like, yeah, we did that. We plugged it into SSO and a few, there's like a Salesforce integration or Zendesk or whatever. You're like, once it's done, you're done, right? We're good. But as you get to scale, it's not like that anymore. It's kind of constant. Like, what's the next integration? What's the next data flow? What's the next automation? What are the like bugs that need to be fixed that either we're doing or our vendors doing or both? We want to launch new things. We want to do enhancements. So you end up paying a lot more attention probably than you would like to technology. Just because you don't have a choice. And when you get to the super high scale, right? Again, you're, those 1%er big orange bubbles of the world, maybe even the little yellow ones, right? That we looked at where most communities kind of are. you might have a person or a whole group of people that are actually dedicated to managing the tech stack. And that's been the case at companies I've worked at. We had entire like teams that did nothing but like project manage and technical manage and vendor manage. And that's a whole different thing, that a lot of people don't think about because they don't have to. But when you get to scale, that might be something you have to sort of worry about there. All right, I'm going to pause here for just a hot second before I go into moderation. This is probably the one that everybody thinks about when we think about scale, right? Which is why I saved it kind of for the last one here. Let me just take a look and see any questions or comments coming in. Nope. Okay. All right. Okay, let's talk about moderation. So I got my start. Some of you may know this, some of you may not. I got my start in community as a volunteer moderator on like gaming communities. Namely, at that time, Sony PlayStation was the one that I kind of grew up in, like in the 90s. And as I mentioned, I don't know, I couldn't tell you offhand like how many members they had or any of the numbers or those sorts of things, but it was in that orange, 1%er bubble for sure. And at that level, moderation is insane. Like it will break you as a human. Now, hopefully none of you ever have to, sort of deal with that. You're not in those types of communities. You won't have that kind of scale. But again, there's things you can learn from that, right? As you think about, what am I going to do as my community gets bigger? Or like even now, like even if your community never got bigger than what it is today, how do I make my moderation efforts better using some of the things that we've learned, right? So let's go through this. Again, you're going to have new problems to solve, problems you never thought of in your entire life. And I'll talk about what some of those are in a minute. You're going to be more reactive than proactive. Like we always teach people when I teach moderators or, courses on moderation or, we used to like onboard moderators into PlayStation. And we had this whole like program to get them up to speed. We used to talk so much about what it means to be proactive and like, use your presence as a tool and like all those kinds of things that you can go hear me talk about, in a million other ways out there on like podcasts and whatnot. But you kind of just get to this point where you're just reacting. Like you refresh a forum page or something and there's like 19 new threads, and you hit refresh again and there's 8 new threads, and you hit refresh again and there's 10 new threads. Like that's the level of volume and, like pace that we're talking about, that at that level anyway, just kind of becomes mind blowing. And you're like, how am I ever going to moderate this thing? Right. And what it usually comes down to is you're just responding to abuse reports or complaints from people, because that's literally all that you could do. And so again, not that you're at that level or you want to be or whatever, but it's something to, kind of think about. How do you stay more in that proactive zone and, try to stay out of reactive as much as possible? The sort of pursuant to number one, like when I talk about new kinds of problems to solve, these are the kinds of things you should start thinking about now, whether you have these problems or not, and sort of build some muscles around them so that if they do ever happen, or you do ever get to a scale where these things start to happen, you're prepared for it. It's not new. You're like, I've already thought about this. I have some document that details these. But at scale, like you get into just crazy stuff that, people creating 40 accounts to evade their ban, people, the ever famous, like, you closed my thread. That's, against the First Amendment. I'm going to get my lawyer to sue you, like the legal stuff, the self-harm stuff, like people threatening suicide and like other things, of course, like porn and other, spam events, PR crises, either caused not having anything to do with you, but, your company or the product or your CEO or something, just all kinds of crazy stuff that you don't really think about until you're there. And let me tell you, it's a lot better to think about that stuff ahead of time and have some thoughts about what you'll do, as opposed to just like reacting to it in the moment. So some of these things you may have already through like your terms of service and, that sort of stuff. But as you scale or you go work for a company at this kind of scale, like, that's the kind of stuff that you have to think about that most other community pros maybe don't or haven't thought about that much. And I'll just say here, that the self-harm, the porn, like that kind of stuff, like I'm sure we've all read articles, right, about people who like those contractors that moderated, Twitter and Facebook and like Reddit, and just like it will destroy you mentally, like that kind of moderation. So I hope that none of you ever have to do that. But it does exist. And that's like a whole nother level of moderation that people don't understand. And I'm glad they don't, because it means they haven't had to experience it. Like, we're probably all better off as humans, like not understanding that level of moderation. But I've had people try to swat me. I've had people send stuff to my house. I've had people say, I know where you live. Here's a picture of your house. Like when Google Earth first came out, that was not great for moderators in communities at scale, right? So I won't go further, but you can imagine, it's a different kind of world there. And then last but not least is kind of the scrutiny of all of this stuff, right? You're just doing your job. You're trying to manage the community and moderate content and whatever the best that you can, but you're going to have more scrutiny from like PR, comms, legal teams like that as you scale up, because all of a sudden, as community becomes more important, they start to see that as a vector for like, oh no, if something bad happens there, then we're going to have to deal with it, And so you start having to work with those teams a lot more. Again, goes back to like, get good at that, collaborate with them, understand what they care about, know how to talk to them, know how to, sort of trade, barter with them in different ways. Because you're going to just do what you do is, from a moderation perspective based on your policies, but that doesn't mean that it's going to free you from them saying, why aren't you shutting down that guy who's saying our product sucks, or, whatever it is. So it just gets a lot more complex and kind of heated there. All right. So before I go to challenges, Akash asks, what is your favorite tool when scaling? That's a good question. I think, I'll tell you what. So we're going to talk about common challenges at scale. The next section is like how to change your strategic mindset to scale. That's my favorite tool, is like your mindset when it comes to strategy. You can buy all the products in the world. You can buy all the tools in the world. You can get the biggest, baddest, greatest community platform, It kind of doesn't matter if you don't have really great strategy as you scale. It helps. I'm not saying it doesn't help having the best tools and, all that, but I don't know that scale is really like solved by tools or technologies or platforms. It's scaled by like your brain and your ability to adapt to whatever that growth brings you, and to change your strategy. And again, like let go of stuff that you used to do in the past that you thought was, absolutely paramount, but maybe it's not. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and say that, your brain is probably the best tool. And we'll talk about how you can sharpen that tool to deal with this a little bit. All right, common challenges. Number one, my personal favorites, why it's number one here, success hides problems, or scale hides problems. Now, I talk about this a lot, that we do this thing as humans, and it's only natural where we make this mistake of thinking that because something is big, or they have a ton of users, or they have a lot of content or whatever, that it's successful. Right? And that's not true. And I think that's been bared out over the last couple of years in some of those mega communities, in some of those mega platforms, that just because they're big doesn't mean they actually know what they're doing. It doesn't mean they're great. And it certainly doesn't mean that they're winning on all fronts. Usually when I show up as a consultant, for example, I do a lot of consulting for like Fortune 500s and, things like that. Among other community types and sizes and companies and whatever. But when I show up to those like Fortune 500s, they're like, oh, we're good. We have this huge audience and they're doing stuff every day. So we must be doing something right. We're pretty great at this. And it's like, no, you just got a lot of people. And sometimes that papers over and hides a lot of the challenges and the problems. And you got to dig deeper and sort of convince people, no, actually, like we still have things to work on. We still have things we should be building. So don't make this mistake. Don't ever let your mind wander into this zone of thinking that just because something's big or huge or whatever, that it's successful. That's almost universally not true. In fact, some of the biggest communities are the most ill-run, which I'll talk about in a minute. Many programs appear to be successful at scale just because of big numbers, right? You'll hear people on LinkedIn like posting about, oh, we did our user group thing, or we did this or that or the other thing. And we have 1 million people around the world attending our user groups. We're so successful. I would go talk to some of the users of those, some of the attendees, I should say, of those user groups and ask them how great those meetings are, or are they getting value from it? The size of it kind of doesn't matter. It just means that you have a larger audience than other people do. So I won't belabor this point anymore, but I think you kind of get what I'm saying here, and it's instructive for you to not fall into that trap, as you scale. Again, some of the best communities, and I use like best, the ones that people think are the best, are like the biggest shit shows behind the scenes, right? Like you show up and you're like, tell me about your team and your management and what's going on. They're just disasters behind the curtain. Some of that is because of the scale, right? But what you find is that like a lot of them are successful in spite of that. And so just don't make the assumption, and also kind of realize, like I said before, bigger numbers, more members, more problems, like however you want to think about it, makes this even harder. And it doesn't mean that they're like somehow a better community builder than you. Like big logo bias is also very real. That's a term that I use to describe like, oh, well, it's Apple, it's this, it's that, right? And it's like, oh, they must like, oh, it's so great community. And it's like, it doesn't mean anything, right? It just means they work at that company. It doesn't mean their community is bigger or better than whatever you're building, right? But it also means you need to avoid that. And then, as we've said a bunch of times, like a lot of the strategies people try to bring from whatever they did before don't really work at scale, but it's hidden because, again, you have like the big numbers and it looks good and whatever. So we often kind of perpetuate various like stereotypes and bad programs and bad strategies and stuff at scale, thinking they work, because we're not like digging in enough to see, get past the numbers. Like, are these really good? Are these bringing value? We just don't ask those questions. All right. Scalable mindset and delivery. Number one, it can be challenging to think bigger, right? Like, and maybe that's why you're all here. I don't know, but like, it's one thing to tell people, hey, community's going to grow. It's going to scale. You want to make it bigger. You want to make it better. You want to do more use cases and this, that, and the other thing. That sounds cool coming out of my mouth and like easy to do, but it's not, especially if there's no precedent at your organization, or no precedent for like your industry or your audience that you're trying to address, or whatever the case is. It's easy for people to just give you some like advice like that, like, oh, we'll just like go figure it out, but it's not that simple, especially if there's no precedent for it. And so you may be doing some inventing, right? There's like all the best practices stuff that we all know and love, but then there's like, I just don't know of any other community that's built for this specific audience or this type of topic set or whatever the case is. Or maybe there has been and they haven't worked, and I don't want to redo the same mistakes that they made, right? So I have to come up with something different. So it's really challenging, right? To kind of think bigger, think better, think different. Those are all really cool on a slide. I think in practice, it's a lot harder to do, and you're not always going to get it right. And kind of similarly to like success hiding problems, sometimes your failures hide success too, right? Like if you kind of feel like, well, we're trying a bunch of stuff and a lot of it's not working. It's like, yeah, but the ones that are working are pretty great, right? So give yourself credit for those. You can kind of get lost sometimes in all of that. Anticipating challenges gets harder as you scale. So I think like in the beginning, we all have a pretty good roadmap of like, all right, we're going to launch this community. We're going to build it from 0 to, 1,000 or 1,000 to 10,000 or whatever, depending on your company and your audience and all that stuff. It's pretty easy at that level to anticipate the core challenges that you're going to face because every community's faced them. And so we have a pretty good sense of what they're going to be and how to deal with them and, how to talk about them and what to build. As you get bigger and things get, more complicated, more challenging, you can't see as far into the future. That becomes a little bit more of a challenge too. So you have to work even harder at kind of having a vision for where are we going, right? What kind of problems are going to pop up and how do we deal with those now? Or how do we at least build a framework for how we think about those problems when they pop up? Orienting teams just gets harder, right? Again, it's easy in the beginning. We're just like, we're running the playbook, right? Here's the playbook. Here's the guide. Like, go do these 20 things. You'll have a pretty successful community in the beginning, right? what happens when you run out of playbook? And this is something that you see, to kind of go back to the slide before around scale hiding problems, is that you'll find that a lot of people, once they sort of run through the playbook and there's no more playbook anymore, and you're in sort of this newer, bigger, scalable world, they don't know what to do anymore, right? And you start to see their efforts kind of stall out, and their mindset stall out, and their ability to deliver stall out, just because the guide isn't there anymore. And so helping teams navigate that gets harder, because you're not just running playbooks. Now you're trying to get them to build new things and innovate and build specifically for your audience and whatnot. And that just becomes more challenging and complex as you go along. Team members may struggle to adapt. You're going to see this point on a lot of what I talk about today. Not everybody is built for a scaled community, and that's okay, right? I'm not saying it's bad. That's fine. Like, some people build at this level, some people build at that level, some people do all of the above, some people do none of the above, right? It's totally fine. There are personal choices, professional choices, and then sort of like, frankly, just like abilities and skills and talent. It's just important to understand that, like, the team you have today, or, may work at a certain level, it might not work at a certain level. This one's really hard, especially if you're a team leader, right? And over the course of that time, you have to make some hard decisions about, the team and the members of the team, and who's kind of getting it done and not. They used to be great when we were smaller, but now they're struggling. There's a lot there that I could probably do a whole other, we could do another hour and a half on sometime, but you're going to see this come up over and over again, because not everybody can kind of like scale their mindset in delivery, and they struggle to do that. And you as a leader, might also have a hard time like helping them do that. So we'll talk about that as we go along here. Process driven. This is usually the one that people are like, oh God, not this, please, no. I do not want to do this, right? Because when we're like startups and we're building new communities, we're super agile. We can do a lot of different things. We can push a lot of different buttons. We don't have to ask anymore, or we don't have to ask, that sort of thing. Over the course of time, as you scale, that's just not going to be the case. And you're going to have to become a little bit more process driven. That word scares people. It frustrates people. I understand why, but there's typically like some minimum set of process as you scale that just has to happen, because if everything is just flying by the seat of your pants and that sort of thing, it's just going to get so hard. And so you have to sort of codify some of this stuff and, build a process. Hopefully you can automate some of that process. But it just becomes more and more a part of your life, whether you like it or not. Red tape and bureaucracy, like that should say stifle, not style. We're not styling agility. We're stifling agility and delivery. It is what it is. You're going to run into politics. You're going to run into like leaders that, are for themselves and not thinking about the community or what you're doing. That's just going to be part of it. And so you have to figure out, like, how do I build processes that sort of navigate around that, or at least make my life easier? Or maybe we take something that was previously red tape and like, can we just build a process that we all agree on, so we don't have to fight about this every 2 months or whatever? It's going to get challenging, but you can navigate at least partially around those things by building really great processes. Collaboration becomes your job, right? So you build these processes, and then your job is sort of like ever increasingly at scale around like, how do we apply the process, right? How do we deliver through the process, through collaborating with people? And again, this is a place where that might not be for you, right? You might say, I kind of liked building communities before it was all about all this process and collaborating and, working with these other teams. And again, that's a choice you could make and decide for yourself and your career and whatever. But if you're going to stick around at scale, or you want to go work at a company that's at scale with their community, you have to accept that process and cross collaboration are going to be part of what you do if you want to succeed. Again, you can not do them, but you're not going to succeed. So, kind of some Brian tough love there of just recognition of this is where you're headed, or you might already be there, and it is what it is. You can make choices, but just know that process is, a big piece of it. team members may struggle to adapt to this, right? You might have people that are like, I don't really like this. I don't want to do, I don't want to read this stupid document that we wrote and go through the steps anymore, right? It was better when I could just make the decision, do what I wanted. Again, I totally get that. Like, that's great. Go work at a place that has a smaller group of people, a smaller community, like whatever. But just know that as you scale, again, that's going to be a challenge. And not everybody is built for a world where like your life is reactionary, red tape avoidance, cross collaborative, whatever. So again, you have to either try to bring people along and help them develop those skills, or just have a recognition that like, hey, maybe this isn't right, for us or for you anymore. Jamie says, as someone who works primarily at scale, it's actually really hard to go backwards and work not at scale. I agree, Jamie. I can't do it. So yeah, startup world for me at this point, I can do it. I can go work in a startup, but I am built to be like an enterprise process, guy at this point. And I kind of don't know how to not do that, frankly. Like, it's just sort of how I view the world. Like, I kind of have those glasses, those lenses in my glasses all the time. And I agree that when I, show up at companies and they're like, we have no process, we don't want it, it's not what we do here. I'm like, cool. Like, again, choice you can make. I'm just not sure that I'm probably the right person to help with that, because what I do is the opposite, right? I help people build better processes, build collaboration, build measurement, sort of codify and make all this stuff official. And so I agree that it's pretty hard to go back once you've lived in this world, but that's might be different for everybody. Laura says, how do you set up these team members for success, especially if they're coming in already at scale versus been there since it was smaller? Everybody's different. I mean, this is like, it's a great question. The answer is, let's do another one of these next year with an hour and a half on like leadership, right? And like growing people through scale. I do have some stuff at the end, like just really high level about this that we'll get to, but the challenge with it is everybody's different, right? Some people you can like, hey, let's do an hour meeting every week. And after 6 weeks, like all of a sudden they go from wherever they were to wherever they want to go. Other people, I could mentor and coach and, put them through 400 courses and whatever, and they're never going to learn it. I'm not saying, it's not a slight on them, right? It's just the realities of like the differences of human beings and what people do and don't want to do and where their skills lie and that sort of stuff. So, my process in there, Laura, is just to sort of look at the individual and say, first of all, like, where do you want to go? I think too many times we look at it as like, well, I need you to go here because I'm your leader and this is what we're doing in this company. I think first we have to start with them and say, where do you want to go? Is this even for you in the first place before we dedicate a bunch of time to trying to like change you as a person or whatever? And if the answer is yes from them, then you can engage and like, all right, cool. Like, let's build a plan, to move you to where we're going to be. And like, we'll do it over time and I'll support you. I think a lot of people skip the first step and then they wonder why isn't this person getting it? They don't seem excited about it. They're not really taken to my coaching. It's like, because they don't want to. We forgot to ask them if they wanted to in the beginning, right? So a little bit of like leadership 101 there, but that's, probably a not satisfying answer to your question, but that's how I'd approach it anyway. Yeah, Jamie, days and days, not an hour. All right. Here's sort of the next big one. Policies and change management. Nobody like grows up wanting to be a policymaker, right? Maybe some like weird people that like saw themselves being politicians their whole lives or something. But like most people are like, I don't like policies. I don't want to make them. I don't want to abide by them. I don't want to make them for other people, right? It's just not a natural like thing that most people want to do. But this becomes a lot of what your role is about as you're scaling. And when you get to scale, boy, does this just become your job. And then the change management, it's one thing to make the policy. It's another to tell people about it and like educate and all that. So let's talk a little bit about this. Bad decisions get made, but they're not as easy as you think. So I'm going to do something right now, which is be probably a little contrarian maybe, and say that, from the outside, one thing that we all do is like we love to dunk, right? We love like, oh, Reddit made this choice, dunk. Stack made that choice, dunk. Twitter did this, dunk. Facebook did that, dunk. Like everybody's got an opinion. Oh, it's so easy. They're so stupid. Why did they make this choice? They're such idiots, And look, they might be. Okay. I'm not saying they're not. I'm not saying the decisions are good or well thought out or whatever. What I am saying, and this is nuanced, is that it's not as easy as we think it is from the outside. And the reason is because when we view someone's policy or how they do change management around that policy from the outside, we see it from just the one perspective, which is the outside, right? We don't have all of the context and the pressure and the red tape and the politics and the, sometimes like governmental things going on and whatnot. And so it's pretty easy for us from the outside to look at it and say, oh, these people are all idiots. Why didn't they just do this? It's so obvious. And it's like, yeah, if it was that obvious and that easy, they probably would have done some version of that, right? It's not that simple. So what I'm saying here is you can have whatever opinion you want to have about other people's policies and change management. But I want you to kind of think deeper when you see those things happen about why, right? Like what happened behind the scenes? What would cause someone to make a choice like that? You don't have to agree with it, but I think it's if you start thinking of the world that way when you see it, you in your own policy making and your own change management, you'll be better, right? Because you'll start to have a broader affinity for like how this stuff gets done and what those pressures are. And I can guarantee you that if you're still thinking like, oh, I could go run insert name of gigantic community here and like make it so much better and make better decisions. I think what you'll find like when you get that opportunity someday, if you get that opportunity someday, you'll step into a world that seems pretty foreign to you actually. And you'll be like, oh, I didn't really realize like this was going on or that was going on, or that frankly, I don't have a choice. Like I have to make this stupid policy I disagree with and communicate it. That happens all the time. And I think I have that actually here as one of the bullets of like, sometimes you end up making a policy and communicating it and you totally disagree with it. It's a weird thing that happens, at scale. So anyway, I'll stop pontificating on that, but I see people dunking a lot online and it's like, it's just not that simple. I wish it was like life would be great, everybody'd be happy, but the world is a complicated place and policies especially. You have to balance the business, society, right, and community. And that's really hard. And this is where a lot of that tension comes from, is that people are like, oh, well, why don't you just do the thing that's great for the community? Because there's this other thing in there called the business, the stakeholders. Again, you don't have to agree with it, right? I'm kind of tired of hearing about how we all have to work for the stakeholders too, but it's a real constraint, right? When you're making these choices. And so there's got to be some balance of those things, or balance it as best you can, but there's always going to be trade-offs. And so I think it's easy to just say like, well, why don't they just make it free and like have better moderation and like, then everybody will be happy. It'll be an amazing. It's because they won't make any money doing that, right? And I'm not saying like that's good or bad or whatever, but it's like it's just a recognition of, some of these people are in business to make money, and your like obvious easy choice is actually the one that's going to put them out of business. So there's a little bit more to it than what we would just want as like the end user or the community member, and it's really hard, right? Like really smart people get trapped into making decisions based on business stuff when they know what's better for the community. It's a really hard, complicated, nuanced thing. Change takes more time and effort and longer to take hold than we ever think it will, right? We always think, oh, we'll update the guidelines or the terms and we'll send an email to everybody and like, that'll be it, right? And I think we know, and this is the next one, like communicating that kind of stuff and change management is a game of percentages at best, right? You're going to make a policy change. Maybe your most, engaged people will see it and go, oh yeah, okay, I get it, whatever. Or they're going to argue with you. But there's like this long tail. Someone will show up like 9 months later and be like, what's this policy? I never heard of this. And you're like, what are you talking about? It's 9 months ago. So, kind of understand that these things don't happen overnight. And you're going to have to spend a lot of time, especially the bigger scale you get, of dealing with policies, change management, communication, and then like changing behaviors if there's behavior change that comes along with those. So there's a lot there. Let me go to the thing here, the chat. Jamie's talking about change management. Most bad policies about community aren't made by community managers. This is true. Yeah, definitely a lot of business stuff in there. Challenges of maturity. I'm going to go through this one pretty quick. Usually you don't get to scale without also being somewhat mature. I would say that's really rare. Certainly in tech, we see examples of companies who rocket to massive scale without maturity, like a Clubhouse a year or two ago would be an example of that. But I would say that's more of an outlier, right, than it is the norm. Usually if you're at scale, you've probably been around for a little bit too. And so you have this other set of like challenges, which is usually when you're at maturity and scale, you start to have like your growth rates get slower. Not because you're doing a worse job or you're, a bad person or something. It's because when you're mature and at scale, you've kind of got all the people that were in that initial set of addressable audience, right? And so then the company starts freaking out and going, oh my God, why is the growth rate slowing? It's like, because that's what happens at scale and maturity, right? Like there's not like an infinite number of people and time in the day for them to continue to contribute. Therefore, bigger wins are harder to come by and your success becomes more incremental. This is really challenging mentally if you're like a high performing, type A community builder where it's like, oh no, have I lost it? Am I no good anymore? How come I'm not having these big wins? You just have to know that that's going to happen and adjust your mindset and that it's okay, that you can't, from the time you started a community where like every day was a huge win to, hey, now we're mature and at scale, you might have a win every 6 months or something, right? Like mentally that can mess with you a little bit. And so you just have to know that that's coming and that it's okay. And that's just part of the journey to maturity and scale. More stakeholders mean more bad ideas. I've already covered this one previously. That's a problem that comes with maturity. It's kind of a good problem, but you have to learn, how to deal with it. And then the cultural change. I think this is like one of the toughest ones for community builders. We have a certain thing in our minds of what we want our culture to be and how we're going to build the community, and we're all going to be friends, and it's going to be the same core group of people forever. None of those things that I just said are true, right? Like as you scale, people come and go, people get upset, you lose friends, it's not the same, there's a different vibe, like the culture's different for 100 different reasons, right, that are out of your control, some in your control. And so these are the kind of the challenges that get piled on top of scale because of maturity. And so there's a whole nother course on that, but just know that those are part of the deal there. All right, so let's do this. Thank you for hanging in here with me. I hope you're learning a lot. I hope this is interesting. I hope you're, finding little nuggets maybe to take and do in your community. Let's take like a 5-minute break if you want to, go to the bathroom or grab a drink or say, Brian, I've had enough of you, whatever it is. And we'll be back in like 5 minutes. And then we'll go through sort of like, how do you strategically borrow from these big communities and like what they do to improve your community, whatever size it is. So we'll be back in just a little bit. All righty. I'll give another minute or so. Get everybody back here. I have the little countdown timer flashing in my face, so I'll make sure that we get through as much as we can here and get you on your way to the weekend. Tim, I see you're back. How's this going? Are there things, is this making sense? Are there things I haven't covered yet that you were hoping to kind of hear about?
No, this is great. I mean, I think a lot of things can be applied to either like earlier stages of like, small scale scaling, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hopefully not the porn, but
hopefully not.
But some of the, I mean, it's really, I think it's relative to your current size and also to your team size. Like, so we're already thinking about like how to automate some things and how to, keeping your stakeholders in the loop, all that stuff. So yeah.
Good. Yeah, I would say the tools are a little bit better these days for dealing with nefarious content, which is a welcome change from what it used to be. They're getting better all the time, and hopefully some of this AI stuff will help us out too. But there'll always be the human element anyway. Oh, was someone else? I heard someone else trying to talk there. Maybe not. Okay. All right. So the little timer flashing in my face tells me that we have 16 and a half minutes, now less. So I'm going to try to go through the next bit here. This is some of the more important stuff probably. So let's kind of jump in here. And again, don't worry if you come back a little later, miss some of this stuff. We'll make sure you get access to it. So what are the strategic approach kind of things you need to do to get to scale or be at scale, right? First and foremost, the shift to broader audiences. Now, we talked about this before, but like you're going to probably grow the personas in your community. Most people, as they scale, as they get bigger, one of the ways you do that is you add more audiences, right? You say, hey, we're going to open our community up to people who speak languages other than English, or, maybe we're going to go to EMEA or Asia or something and like build community for them. And so that's just going to be a natural part of your growth and scaling. And so you have to know that that's coming and prepare for it and be ready to sort of shift to that idea of like, oh, we're a global community now and not just like a North America community or something. That gets harder, right? Especially with like languages. You start doing localization. You have to like think about, how do you build content for those different cohorts of people, those different personas, people with different cultural backgrounds. I mean, there's just like almost an infinite number of things that can happen when you start doing that. And so you have to be ready for it. I would personally say kind of put some of that stuff off as long as you can, but then when you have to do it, it's going to be challenging. And so you have to have this like mindset shift of we're no longer doing this for one audience. We're doing it for a bunch. How you measure success will probably change and will be different as you think about success for different countries, locales, cultures, languages, whatever. One of the mistakes that I always see made is people have this like big, gigantic, like, English speaking community. And then they're like, all right, cool. We're going to roll it out to Japanese and to Brazilian Portuguese and to French and Italian and whatever. And they try to use the same strategies, the same tactics, the same measures, that they did before to define the success of this or how to build it. And it just doesn't work. And this is like one of the biggest challenges in localization is getting people to understand you can't actually do the same things that you did for America or Australia or the UK or whatever have you, Canada, right? You're going to have to think about this almost like building an entirely different community in some cases. And that's really hard for people, but you have to sort of like make that shift as you grow and you add those audiences and know that before you do it, that's going to be part of the challenge of doing it. Team members may struggle with this, right? So here we are again. Some people like just really struggle with that idea. And I would say actually the vast majority of people struggle with this because we know our culture, we know our language, we know where we live and how people talk and what kind of content they want. And if I tell you as an American, or, as someone from like living in London or wherever it is, like, hey, go build community for, a group of Japanese people, or, whatever it is, like in India, or like, I mean, that's really hard to do, right? For you to sort of go build a community for a culture you're not part of, you don't understand, you don't speak the language, that sort of thing. So you can partner with other people who do have those attributes and hopefully get to where you need to be. But, the broader audience bit is strategically really important, but probably one of the hardest things you can do. All right. Long-term planning. I think you should always do this. If your community is 4 people, start thinking longer term. If your community is 4 million people, start thinking longer term, right? Most community teams don't have a plan. Full stop, right? Like, this is what I do for a living. I go to companies, I help them build plans. I show up, I say, what's your current plan? They say, what are you talking about? No roadmap, no plan, no, just like, well, we're just doing a bunch of stuff, whatever we feel like this week. And then we wonder why we don't get to scale. We wonder why we're not succeeding. We're not efficient. We're not effective. We don't have a plan. Not only do we not have a plan, maybe the ones we do are like, oh, here's what we're doing this month. You need to start thinking about like weeks and months and quarters and years, and like have a vision for what is the end state that we're trying to get to here. And then how do we work backwards, right, to make that a reality? I have a bunch of resources for this online. Like, you can go find those about like roadmaps and other, like, especially on the podcast website. In Before the Lock, go to the resources tab. There's a bunch of free templates. A lot of those are around planning and goal setting and, that sort of thing. And I'll put the link in the chat here while we're talking. So you can go find those, but just know, like, above all else, you got to think longer term. And as you can imagine, that's, kind of hard for people, right? Sometimes you might even get to a place where you're looking several years out, which is kind of hard to do, right? Like, if you do like a 1-year plan, you might have some semblance of like, all right, I kind of get it, right? I kind of see where we're going. I kind of forecast a few months ahead. If I told you had to make a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan today, it gets a lot more vague, right? It gets a lot more like, well, if everything works out in 5 years, we may be in this place. The point is not that you nail it and it's perfect and it's amazing and you're going to do everything on there exactly when you say you do. It's just that you have one, right? And that you have that sort of guiding light on your team or for yourself or for your stakeholders. Again, whole other course on roadmaps, in the academy. In fact, if you go there and use the code roadmap, you'll get it for free as well, because I did that one the other day. So you can go get that one and learn all about roadmaps, but like, have a plan. You have to have vision and strategic chops to do that though, right? Like, because when you're thinking that far out, it's like, okay, but like, what's the vision here? What is that end state? And not everybody can do that, or not everybody's practiced that. We don't really teach that in school. We don't really teach it in business. People show up and we're like, hey, have a vision. And you're like, I don't know what that means. What do you mean have a vision? So it's a skill that you have to develop over time. And I would say most people don't. No one comes out of the womb with a vision, right? I think it's something we learn. And so for you, I think you want to exercise that muscle for yourself and like start learning how other people craft visions and how they talk about it. One way to do that is actually just like go to Google and Google pitch decks and see how like startups, like a lot of them have years later, their deck has leaked, right? And you can see how other people do it, and you can start developing it for yourself, but also help. Right? Long-term planning is a very specific skill that people learn over a very, kind of long period of time. And we should not just assume that everybody knows how to do it. That's probably why I have a job, right? Is because people are like, I don't know how to do this. I don't want to do it. Let's go hire Brian to help us like build a plan. Nonetheless, I think everybody should, be planning all the time. So pretty basic there, but really, really important. You'd be surprised how many people have no plan. Automation. We talked a little bit about this before, right? So at some point, you're going to have no choice. You're going to have to automate. We get that. Community management at scale, like I said, it's more operational. It's less human. We've talked about that. Let's go here, though. but like, what platforms do I need? Now, we're not technical experts, probably. Maybe some of you are. Great, good for you. Congrats on being, both a tech expert and a community builder. I would say that combination is exceedingly rare, right? Because most of us that are community builders are like, we're about people. We weren't about the tech, And so when it comes to things like SSO and backend automations and data flows and information integrations and all these things, you're going to need help, right? It's not just going to be about you. And so you're going to have to learn enough to be dangerous, to kind of know what that landscape looks like and what those tools are and what kind of things can we or should we automate. But then you're going to have to partner with people that have the technical expertise. So you need to do a little bit of both, I think, if you're going to scale yourself and your community. People may struggle with this. Not everybody wants to be a technical expert. Not everybody likes interfacing with technical people, right? So there's a lot there that needs to happen. But I think you have to, and you want to shift to automation. Go figure out what are the 5 things I do every week that I'm tired of doing, and is there any possible way to just make it happen or make 90% of it happen? When we think about automation, we always think of it has to 100% be automated. If you can automate half of a process, that's half of that time you get back, right? So don't think that if it's 100% or nothing. A lot of times it's can I automate a few steps and just make this a little easier for myself or for my team? That's really important as you kind of strategically shift what you're doing as you scale. Business outcomes. Do you even know me? Did you think we were going to have a conversation without me talking about this? You knew I was going here. Look, the cost is the thing, right? So people often say, why do we have to talk about ROI and we have to do all this calculation? We have to talk about business outcomes. A lot of times the answer is cost, right? To have a community platform, especially at scale, I can't stress enough that when you get to a massive scale, like some of those communities we talked about at the very beginning, their hosting costs are more money a month than you'll ever see in your entire life, right? So they're we better be getting some real value out of this thing, right? That we can measure and show that it's happening, because if we don't, we are burning, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars a month, a year, a quarter, whatever, right? And so this stuff isn't free. And so we have to sort of justify what we do. And a lot of times that's by flipping the script and saying, instead of this being about cost, it's about value. And let me talk to you about all of the impact and value we're building through this community, right? So again, you kind of get forced into it. Strategies to grow the community don't always mesh with ROI. So kind of like we were talking about policies, right? A lot of times you're like, hey, I could go do a whole bunch of stuff and probably grow this community really big. But are those the things that are going to get us value, or vice versa? So sometimes this is why it's why are they doing this program? No one wants this. Nobody asked for this, right? And it's because that's the thing that's getting them to the value and the ROI, even if maybe you don't like it or that sort of thing. So again, there's a tension there that has to be moderated and sort of dealt with along the way, right? Community teams can find themselves, a lot of people, again, we're not being born thinking about ROI and business outcomes and how to, do the calculations and that sort of stuff. So this is a skill, just like anything else, right? You're going to have to build it. You're going to have to practice it. You're going to have to want to do it because it's hard. That's the old A League of Their Own thing of if it was easy, everybody would do it. The hard is what makes it great, right? If you know that movie and that quote. That is true of this, and not everybody is kind of cut out for this or have done it before. And so it's something you have to really dig into and practice. And again, I have a bunch of resources you can go consume to figure out how to do that. But the ability to tie in as much of a straight line as possible, here's what we're doing in the community and here's how it's driving impact, is one of the most important skills that you could ever learn and develop and learn how to do. And then it becomes mandatory. Then the business, you don't have a choice, right? They're going to say to you, show me the value or you're not going to work here anymore, right? And we see this a lot. And I feel very sorry, for everybody who gets laid off and those kinds of things. But we can also protect ourselves from that type of a situation by continually showing, here's the value we're delivering, here's how it matters to the business, because then you might force them to think twice before you're on the list, or whatever the case is. So not all of those things are about performance, of course, but do yourself a favor, learn this skill, get really good at it. learn how to talk about it, learn how to be confident about those results, and your career, your time at that company, your ability to get promotions, raises, to get more responsibility, whatever it is that you want, will just become easier because a lot of people can't develop the skill or they don't want to. And so that's like a choice you can make. Okay. I know I am like bumping up against the end here. So we're going to talk real quickly about team and career. But first, Francisco said you said something really great in your talk the other day. Whatever plans we have, get validation, functions. Yeah, this is the other thing, right? Is that people just like when they do make a plan, they don't ask anybody about it. They don't validate it with their leadership, right? And I want you to have more of a collaborative relationship with your leadership, right? Say, hey, I took a swing at this. Let me know if I'm missing anything. Does this make sense to you? Where can I be better? Can I get some coaching on the things you think I'm not covering off on here, right? Don't just like throw out a plan and then be surprised when it doesn't resonate with people who you didn't talk to first or, validate it with. That's just sort of, again, kind of collaboration 101, but you'd be surprised how many people operate in that way. Jamie says, stop talking about engagement as your business page views, Jamie. It's like the master metric, right? It's all about page views. Yeah, nobody cares about engagement, right? Like when you get to the C-suite and you're talking to the CEO and you're like, oh, we had this many page views and this many posts and we have engagement and belonging and feelings and whatever. Those might be valuable things for you to know and to measure so you can operate the community well. I'm not saying they're not. But at that level, they want to know about dollars, right? What's the impact? What's the ROI we're driving? Are we making this easier on ourselves, on our customers? Are they happier? All of those kinds of measures. Don't ever let anybody tell you, including at least one presenter that I saw at this conference, don't ever let anybody tell you this doesn't matter. You don't need to measure ROI anymore. That is just not the reality of the situation. I'm sorry. Like, I don't want to call anybody out, but the reality is if you decide like, oh, I don't need to do ROI, I don't need to describe impact, you're probably not going to work there very much longer. And I'm sorry to like be blunt about it that way, but that's kind of the reality of this. So take on that challenge, go find those resources, get help, like whatever you got to do to get really, really good at that. And then I promise you, your life is going to get significantly easier over time. Okay, team and career, real quick. Challenges for teams at scale. I think we kind of all know what these are, but just for the heck of it, let's go over these. We talked about culture, right? It's not going to be the same. We're not going to have the same people. We're not going to feel the same. It's going to be a lot of different stuff. That's really hard for teams. It's really hard for leaders. And if you're at scale, you know this. If you want to be at scale, get ready for it. Start, going there. You're going to go from general to specialized, right? At the beginning, we were talking earlier, some of you were introducing yourselves saying, hey, here's how I, do community today at my company, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you're a generalist. As you get to scale, you have to become a specialist, right? Your team might get bigger. You might focus on different things. You're going to specialize. That's going to happen. You won't have a choice. If you are at scale and maturity and you're still a generalist, you have a problem, right? Just because like, how could you be at scale and maturity as one single person? It doesn't make any sense. And ultimately, that's an imbalance that just can't be for some period of time. Career paths and growth opportunities. They're going to change. Sometimes they'll be there. Sometimes they won't. You need to sort of decide for yourself what makes you happy. Do you like this thing at scale versus when it was small? Do you want to continue on this way? There's a lot of different things. And then within a company, of course, it's like, how do I help my team deal with that? Is there growth here? Can we build a more specialized, larger team or something like that? There's a lot of challenges at scale around teams. And a lot of times we think that asking for more is the answer. Sometimes it is, but that's also hard too, right? Because there's some limit to how many people you can reasonably have on a team, and it becomes more about efficiency and sustainability than it does numbers. And that changes how you think about the career pathing and the opportunities and all of that. We talked about the rest of this before. It's going to get formal. It's going to get process driven. It's going to become about operations. Management's going to be a thing more than it was before, right? These are all like real challenges for teams as you scale. Again, I could probably spend days on each one of these individually and talk through it, but just things for you to think about and get ahead of as you scale. What about individuals, right? What about you, the person, the individual? There's 4 paths here that you could take. Number one, you could be in it for the long haul. You could say, yes, this is for me. I want to see this through. I want to go all the way. This is what I want to do. I'm going to learn all these new skills. It's going to be great. That might be for you. For other people, it might be, hey, I actually want to parlay this into a broader role. I want to talk for a minute about this one and say that I think personally, we have not been ambitious enough as community professionals in terms of thinking broader about when we get really good at communities and we've proven the value and the team's grown and that sort of thing. We haven't done as good a job as I would like to see parlaying that into a broader like customer experience or customer success role, right? Where you own more than just the community, you own more of the customer experience overall. We have the skills, right? We've been doing it. We know how to build these things. We know how to talk to customers. We need to sort of think about if that's what you want to do. Not everybody wants to do that, but one path could be that internally you make the play and say, hey, look, actually, I think I'm ready for the next thing, whatever level that is. I want to own more of the experience and do what we did with community for that and integrate them together and make it better. I lived this life. Once upon a time, I was like a VP of community. And then I took over the entire like CX org at a company and we just did it all together. And I'd like to see more of that. And I think CX and CS in particular are like places where that could happen. Or you could do none of that and you could go somewhere else and like do it all over again. Like some people are very happy to be like, hey, I did it. I reached the top of the mountain. I'm going to go to some small company and like see if I can do it again or whatever the case is. Or you can just like leave, right? I think like sometimes, we feel like we have to do the same thing forever. If you get to the top of the mountain, you feel great about what you did, and there's other opportunities, I would say feel free to go do that. Now, you don't need my permission to do any of these things, right? These are all for choices you can make and things you can do. But sometimes it's weird. Like you talk to people, I do a lot of like coaching and mentoring, and like sometimes people don't know that these are options that are available. They just think they have to like go one way or one path or stick it out. And I think that as your community grows, it actually gives you a whole bunch of different opportunities to do different things and think differently about your career, perhaps than maybe we have before. So that's my little pep talk for the day. Whether it was helpful or not for you, I don't know, but you can kind of decide where you want to go from there. Okay, that was a lot. I'm 4 minutes over. Let me check the chat real quick. Let's see. Akash says they're not wrong asking about value for their money. That's right. I think sometimes we take it personal, right? People are like, hey, what's the ROI of the community? What value we're generating? And as community builders, we get all like, what are they? They're trying to jam me up, It's like, no, they're just asking the questions they should be asking, right? They're doing their job. It's just like you're trying to do your job. There's a lot there. Francisco said, I did learn that I'm not comfortable working in big companies. Great, right? Like some people like it, some people don't. Some people want to work in a big community, some people don't. Eye of the beholder there for sure. Okay, so I'll stop talking in like 10 seconds. But last but not least, everything that I just went over is in a like pre-built course, recorded, whatever. If you go to communitystrategyacademy.com/p/communities at scale and just go to the course of this same name, use the code there, scale, you'll get it for free. That way you can always come back to it. You can always, if you want to hear me drone on for another, several hours, you can always go play that and I can talk you to sleep every night or whatever it is that you want to do, but there's a free resource there for everybody. Thank you for coming and kind of participating. I hope this was useful. If you have questions or comments, I'm happy to stay here and answer as many as you want, or we could all like go to our weekends. It's totally up to you, what you want to do, but thank you for coming, and I'll kind of stick around here for questions.
Thank you, Brian, for such informative session. It was so full of learning. So I have like filled pages with information, and I have a lot of questions. But yeah, uh, folks, if you have questions for Brian, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can also unmute and ask them yourself.
Ready for the weekend.
Hey, I don't blame you for sure. So let's do this. Let's all cast you all back out into the world so that you can go enjoy your weekends. If you ever have any questions or anything, come find me on LinkedIn or any of the other 19 places that I can probably be found online. The Slack channel for Led by Community, for example. Always happy to chat anytime. Let me know how I can help. I hope this stuff was useful, to you all. And yeah, go out there and go conquer.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Ryan. Amazing. We have Jamie also that did the previous workshop. I just wanted to pop in and say hello and thank you for your hard work during this summit. You did lots, you contributed with lots of things, so we are really grateful. Recordings are going to be for everyone available towards the end of next week. We are also include the note of the code to redeem the course, so not to worry. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks, Francisco, and everybody. I'll catch you all later. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take
Have a
care
good
all.
one.
Bye bye.
All right.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Akash.
Thank you.
Well
Okay,
done, man.
stop
See
the
ya.